we talked about it earlier about how if you have purpose, that's good because that's like an eternal longing. Ecclesiastes 3:11. I don't think people will always connect sowing and reaping here, but there's something really interesting that I put together recently. And when I say I put together, I meant I read Josh Kraft's book, The Way to Live, which if you don't have that.
We've had Josh on the book to come talk about, on the podcast to talk about his book. So go listen to that episode and buy his book.
Dude, the great thing is I can't text authors that write my favorite books. I actually said this to Josh. I was like, bro, I can't text the authors of all my favorite books, but I can text you. So I will just be reading and I'll just shoot him a text because it's honestly, it's so good. The way he lays that out, the amount of just aha moments I've had while I've been reading it have been incredible. And so this actually, what we're about to share is from his book, from deep in the book. And it just, when he said it, it just stuck out to me so much because here's what will happen so often. And you talked about, if I could just be a cowboy, right? What we don't realize.
If I could just, but what's my one thing? That was Mitch's question.
Yeah.
What's my one thing?
Right. So sowing and reaping. What you sow, you reap, right? Like you can't sow average and reap greatness, right? And he who sows the flesh reaps from the flesh. He who sows the spirit reaps from the spirit. That's what it says. I believe is that in Romans? Or is it,
I think that's Romans. I'm not certain.
Yeah. But it's definitely from the Bible, and we should have looked it up beforehand, but I literally was just thinking about that now. And so we get that. We read that. We're like, yeah, okay. But so much in purpose, we think like, yeah, if I could be a cowboy. Well, here's the thing. The nature of what you sow into determines the nature of what you reap. So if you sow something that's fleshly, it's going to, as far as fulfillment and motivation, guess what? Flesh dies. It's very temporal. So will your fulfillment be. So will your motivation.
My youth pastor, he used to make this really basic analogy about, living a kind of like, he was a massive influence on my life.
We all know about Pastor Tad.
Yeah, Tad Tomaseski. He's a big influence on my life, big influence on Josh's life. But he used to talk about the two dogs, right? You have two dogs in your life. Like one is the flesh and one is the spirit. And he says, do you know which dog is stronger? The one you feed the most.
Yeah, exactly. And that there's actually an ancient Chinese proverb like that as well, and it's so good. So what I wanted to talk about with that, you have spirit, soul, and body, and what you sow towards will determine the fulfillment and motivation that you get as a result.
Yeah, that's right.
And if you can understand that each part of you, spirit, soul, and body, all has these cravings, and so when you start to understand that, you know what cravings you're feeding, so you can start to identify, hey, wait a minute, if I feed this craving, I know that this is going to be limited fulfillment, limited motivation. So like cravings of the flesh are pretty obvious, right? I went with really basic ones. This is not an exhaustive list. Food, water, sex, right? Like these are some very common ones. You need to fulfill the food one because, you'll die. Definitely need to fulfill the water one, right? And, God made sex. So in the right settings, of course, you need to fulfill that as well.
There is the mandate to multiply.
There is the mandate to multiply.
In the right context,
correct.
It's the right thing. But and with all those things, with food, water, and sex, right? You get them. And then, but what's after that?
Right. Yeah.
You're just exactly filling yourself. And we're in a season of fasting like many people are. And fasting is meant to remind yourself it has many purposes, but one of the purposes of fasting is to remind yourself, these are things that I act like the most important thing in my life is my relationship with God. And I'm going to set aside something like food that's super important in my life. I'm going to put it to the side so that instead of desiring food to fill myself up, every time I'm hungry, I'm going to say, God, I want more of you in my life.
Yeah. But so many people, if you think about this, completely remove this from just a Christian context or seeking after God. How many people, we all probably knew I'm saying we all, but like I know you knew people when you were coming up in the teams. I grew up in locker rooms my whole life playing sports. There was always that dude that was just all about the next chick.
Yeah.
Right. And
I know a lot of those guys.
Yeah, so do I. And that was like their whole life. And what was it? They would get sick and tired and they'd have to move on because it was never fulfilling. Right. And the motivation would end very, very quickly. And you can see this in all these areas. And we don't think about, like I said, this is not an exhaustive list, but really think about the things that like you're being motivated by and that you're the cravings that you're fulfilling in the soul realm, which is your soul would be your mind, will, and your emotions. Okay. So we're huge on thinking on this podcast, but you also have to understand that your thinking is not eternal. Right. So what does the soul crave? Here's a big one that a lot of people don't realize is security. And when I say security, how many people have sacrificed eternal purpose because they're like, ooh, that would put me tight financially, or what
if I ran out of money?
Right.
I've had that conversation with SEALs.
Yeah.
Right. Guys leaving the military. And, like if SEALs can feel this way about a lack of security, anybody can feel this way.
Yeah,
and crazy. I hope that this is like a cure for people and a reminder for you. Like these are guys who used to risk their life, they didn't do it for money. right? They would like bullets coming at them, like, but I know where I'm here. I know what my purpose is. And then they get out of the military and they're like, well, I just need like a stable job. Because the one thing you don't have to worry about in the military is getting paid.
Right.
You got a lot of things to worry about. You don't have to worry about getting paid. So you transition into civilian life. There's a lot of things you don't have to worry about anymore. But they kept worrying about the wrong thing.
Right.
Focused on the wrong thing. And like, well, how do I get that stable income? And I was like, no. We've got to we need to do, and many of these guys, they have an entrepreneurial spirit. Like, I mean, how great of an entrepreneur are you as a Navy SEAL when I'm great at making decisions under pressure? I know how to make decisions without all the answers. I'm extremely hardworking. I'm a self-starter, like all the things that many SEALs are.
Yeah, well,
so set up to be entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
But then they don't do it because they're looking for the job security. And I would, many of these guys, I would talk with them and I would say, so you're telling me your biggest fear is that you would run out of money. Like, what's going to happen? You think you're just going to die instantly?
Yeah.
Like your bank account goes to zero and it's over? Right? Like, I don't know if anyone else has ever had a zero balance before. I have. I didn't die.
Yeah.
Right? I figured it out.
Well done.
And you know what SEALs are really good at? Figuring it out.